Saludos a todo el mundo, Drexo aquí presente y me encuentro en una entrevista muy especial con Chris, también conocido como Mighty Sug, el director y cofundador de Hidden Variable Studios. Hi Chris.
Hey, my name's Charlie. I don't know if that should be a.
Oh really?
Yeah, it's all right.
Oh,
Keep it, keep it. It's good. I don't know. I figured now's the time. I'm glad that wasn't on question number 3. Yeah. All good, all good.
The first game that Hidden Variable Studios made that was Bagged.
Mm.
Then you guys made the award-winning game Trees. The third game you guys developed was Skullgirls Mobile. So I wanted to know what was the inception of that. How you guys decided to, I assume, make a prototype of Skullgirls Mobile, present it to Lab Zero Games or Autumn Games, and then work from that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been friends with a number of folks over at Lab Zero for a while, and I was chatting with them at a conference and asked them just offhandedly if they had any plans to go through and bring Skullgirls to mobile. And as it so happens, they were already talking to some developers about making a mobile version of Skullgirls, but it was going to be a lot more like a very traditional mobile game. So it was going to be more like a puzzle fighter match 3 game that just happened to feature some of the Skullgirls characters. Wow. And while that would have been cool and I would have played that, there's a lot of match 3 games, there's a lot of puzzle fighter style games, and there aren't a lot of fighting games on mobile that really scratch that itch. And I asked them like why they weren't considering actually going through and making a real kind of reinventing a Skullgirls style fighting game for mobile, and they gotten a lot of feedback from other developers that it just wasn't going to be possible given some of the unique challenges that Skullgirls have in terms of high res frames and just making sure that it would all run properly, etc., etc. And so I immediately kind of took that as a challenge, and we over the course of a month or two put together a really basic, Filia versus Filia prototype, just to go through and demonstrate the kind of ideas that we had about taking the much more complicated moveset for Skullgirls Second Encore and mapping it to obviously more intuitive controls for mobile. And that's basically how Skullgirls Mobile was born. I think there's probably behind the scenes, I've always been a huge fighting game fan, and I've always been the guy in my friend group that was always evangelizing fighting games and trying to help get people excited about it. And so, this opportunity to basically introduce people to a genre that can be very intimidating. I think everyone sees a fighting game, and unlike other games like MOBAs or whatever it is, there's like usually 2 characters on screen, there's life bars, they're punching and kicking, doing everything else and trying to go through and kill each other. It's easy to understand, but when you actually put a controller in someone's hand, the inputs can be really complicated, and it's not quite the challenge of actually experiencing that what you're seeing on screen can be really intimidating. And so I thought this was a really great opportunity to kind of make this feel like a welcoming experience for people, so they can really get their hands dirty with fighting games and hopefully find new fighting game players that didn't realize they were huge fans of the genre from the get-go.
Of course, a lot of people that I know of and I've talked to, they take Skullgirls Mobile as their first fighting game, their first entry into the world of fighting games, because it's a more simplified and accessible version, and that encourages them to play on the real game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's exactly what we always hoped to. We wanted it to be a gateway game for people, so they can actually start having fun within the genre. Even if the inputs are more simplified, it just means we remove that input barrier. You can start thinking a little bit more tactically and start to indirectly understand the mechanics about how a fighting game ultimately works. And before you know it, even if someone then goes and starts to play a fighting game, even though the inputs are a lot more complicated, some of those core concepts will still apply. So that's really encouraging to hear. Hopefully they go through and branch out and start digging into other fighting games too.
Do you ever thought to be in this position that the Hidden Variable will carry on the spirit of Skullgirls, like carry on not only the mobile game but also the console game through across multiple platforms, PC, consoles, mobile, like that change from being a mobile developer to now a full console developer too, and literally carry on Skullgirls for 10 years and even more. We're right now on the 11th anniversary of the game.
Yeah, I don't think when we started Skullgirls Mobile that was ever our expectation as to where we would find ourselves. I mean, our background before Hidden Variable was in PC and console games, so we always had that pedigree and that familiarity. And even though we started in mobile, even for games we were pitching, we were always imagining ways in which we could be a multi-platform developer and bring them to other platforms anyway. Even Threes, we brought that to Xbox. It was playable in snap mode for a long time, the only fully snappable game. So it's something that we'd always been dabbling with. So I think when kind of the opportunity presented itself, we were ready to kind of step in and go through and tackle that. But we knew when we started Skullgirls Mobile that Skullgirls Second Encore was already kind of winding down a little bit, in the sense that all the DLC had more or less been completed. There were a few balance patches and whatnot, but we knew that Skullgirls Mobile was going to be leading the charge for the Skullgirls IP in general for a while. And for a lot of, a long time, we were attending events like Evo or Combo Breaker, and having a Skullgirls booth and demoing the Skullgirls mobile game, and basically finding new Skullgirls fans that were then either playing Skullgirls mobile or just discovering Skullgirls for the first time and going and playing Second Encore. So we've always been celebrating all versions of the game ever since we started working on it, even though we were just the mobile developers. And then obviously because of a variety of circumstances, when the time came where, it was needed for someone to go through and kind of take the reins and drive things as it relates to the game on other platforms, we were fortunate to be in a good position to be able to do so, obviously along with the support of all the folks over at Future Club.
Talking about Future Club, I talked this with Persona Sama when I met him. But I wanted to know how is the working relationship between the two studios? Because I understand right now that Future Club became or is a supporting studio. Like if anyone needs assets or extra development hands, they assist with that. So, and I also know they're developing their own game from what I heard.
Yeah.
But right now, the working relationship between Hidden Variable and Future Club, you guys plan out all the stuff, and they give direct assistance with the development of what is planned, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, technically, if you look on the store, Hidden Variable is listed as a developer, but we really see Future Club as co-developers. So many folks over there have so many years of experience working on Skullgirls. We lean really heavily on their expertise and their understanding of the IP and the characters and everything else as well. Predominantly, Future Club, is offering art and animation services, whereas on the Hidden Variable side, we're kind of doing a little bit of everything else: engineering, design, et cetera, et cetera. And Future Club helps out, in a number of different areas too. But no, I mean, we're all in the same Slack together. We try and go through and basically keep each other abreast, involved in every aspect. They're always sharing details and progress as it relates to the art and animation side, and we're always sharing, different things that are progressing, across all the various SKUs that we're ultimately working on. So I mean, we've always just seen them as collaborating partners, and that was the case even when a lot of the folks at Future Club were at Lab Zero. There was very much the type of mentality. I think we're proud to be kind of stewards of Skullgirls moving forward, but we know that a lot of those folks have been around ever since the very, very beginning of when Skullgirls was made. So we want to make sure that all of them have, a meaningful voice in all the decisions that we make moving forward as it relates to the game.
So the Evo showcase, we heard that the Skullgirls Championship Series is coming back.
Yep.
But a little bit different from what I heard from Kai, that this new series is completely under the control of Hidden Variable. It no longer is associated with E-stars from I research. Is that how are things going with that?
Yeah, so yeah, the new version of the Skullgirls Championship Series is not going to be involving E-stars, even though they were involved in the original one. We're working with new partners. All of that hasn't been announced. So there's not a ton that I can ultimately say about it, beyond the fact that we were really excited about the response that folks had to the original championship series. And we've been working behind the scenes for a long time to figure out the right way to go through and bring it back. And so we're super excited to be able to launch that in 2024, and we should have some more news about that before the end of the year.
Thinking about the championship series, the last one was featured a lot of online tournaments. But mainly due to some things with the netcode, since Skullgirls is already like an 11-year-old game.
Yeah.
Can we expect like any quality of life improvements to the netcode of the game?
Sure. Yeah. Right now on Second Encore, our primary focus is obviously on finishing Marie and making sure that we're able to go through and release her and go through all the phases of a full alpha release, all the stuff we normally do through a full character release. But once we have that more or less sorted, a lot of our attention is going to be shifting more towards those quality of life / additional supporting features that will help Skullgirls Second Encore feel like it's kind of fully feature competitive with a lot of the other modern fighting games that are being released more recently. And so I think that includes some stuff, everything from, improvements in the netcode. I mean, it's worth noting we've done a ton of refactoring to the original Skullgirls code base. Part of the delay before we ultimately, we're working on the Xbox version. We expressed our intention to do that a long time ago, and there was a lot of when's the Xbox version, when's the Xbox version. We wanted to go through and actually do a ton of refactoring to the core code base from the get-go before we went through and embarked on doing those new ports, and that's what enabled us to go through not only do the Xbox version but also the completely reworked version of the Switch SKU that we've been meaning to do for a while. So while we've touched the netcode a little bit, that is something that we're definitely eager to go through and revisit. And that also starts to touch on other things like matchmaking systems and crossplay and things along those lines.
So talking about matchmaking,
yeah,
there's been a lot of questions by fans if there could be the possibility of adding crossplay into the game. I understand that having crossplay across different platforms, each one have their own requirements and can be a little bit difficult in the logistics side of things. But I wanted to know, has there been discussions or at least like some planning, like maybe we could introduce crossplay into the game?
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that we've talked about a lot actually, and done a number of kind of technical assessments internally. You're right; it is a pretty significant undertaking. Otherwise we would have done it already. But it's definitely something that we want to go through and add, and we know how powerful and impactful that will be to kind of broaden the audience by enabling them to go through and play with each other. I think one of the big challenges that we have in general, again, once kind of Marie is complete, is figuring out exactly what the right order of features to go through and implement will be as it relates to a lot of this quality of life stuff. Like, for example, once we go through and implement, let's say we're going to implement crossplay, we're now enabling all these players to play with one another. Does it make more sense, for example, for us to make sure that we already have a matchmaking system, improved matchmaking tools in place to make sure that the right kinds of players, once the player pool is that much bigger, there can be additional challenges that are introduced if you don't have ways in which you can ensure the right players are being matched up with the right other players. Even if crossplay is a top priority, let's say, it may mean that we need to go through and do matchmaking related stuff first, which can ultimately go through and push that back. So that's the phase that we're in right now. We're basically assessing a lot of those other additional features that we want to go through and add, and then we can kind of figure out the ideal order in which we want to go through and implement them. But our hope is to go through and continue to grow Skullgirls Second Encore and help the console experience be as close to a fully competitive product with a lot of the fighting games that are being released, in the this year and in years to come.
As a quality of life addition to Skullgirls Second Anchor, right now many new players that are getting into the game have a little bit of trouble, like trying to get matches against people on the same level. I understand that when Skullgirls originally released, it didn't have like a ranking system like many other games have right now, dividing players into like bronze, silver, gold rankings. So in order to help those players, like trying to improve the online experience to new players,
Yep.
has there any plans to add something like that into the game?
Absolutely. I think that one of the things that, Skullgirls, one of the strengths of Skullgirls when it first initially launched was the power of its tutorials and the ways in which it can make what can be a very complicated game more accessible for people. And I think over the last 10 plus years, there have been a lot of new advances and techniques that other games have gone through and demonstrated that have been very effective in that regard as well. So that's always been a pillar of what Skullgirls is all about, is that core sense of accessibility. And so I think there's so much more that we could be doing now in order to go through and make increase the odds that the first time you pick up a controller and play Skullgirls, you're having fun as quickly as possible. And I think matchmaking is just one example of one of the ways in which we could go through and improve that. So that's a very long way of saying that it absolutely resonates with us, and it's something that we definitely want to go through and improve. It's really just a matter of exactly which order we want to go through and implement those things. So yeah, something to look forward to.
Recently, in this Evo, we had the Marie showcase. She's currently in the pre-alpha state,
Yeah.
and well, I thought that Kai said that there was going to be another announcement for her during the grand finals, but when I asked him, he told me get mixed. So
Sounds like that.
yeah. So I wanted to ask how far is Marie from achieving that alpha release state?
Um, Unfortunately, I can't give a very specific date, but I can say that as you were able to see based on the showcase itself, she's really far along. Long story short, you can expect that Marie's alpha will be arriving very soon. Exactly when, I can't quite say. So
I have to like applaud the team when you guys mentioned during the roadmap that we were going to get at least two characters this year.
yeah,
Different to other years, we only had one single character. Like seeing how far Marie is in development, like you guys are like full throttle trying to finish her before the end of the year.
yeah. Absolutely. I think on Skullgirls Mobile, you can definitely expect to see Marie launching before the end of the year, in addition to the other characters that we're making available through, as part of our new monthly live ops and things along those lines too. So
Now, final question for second anchor. Now that Marie is the final character of season one,
Yeah.
and we still don't have any confirmation of a season two, just a tease, like maybe. Are there any plans to repackage the game, add all this new content that we received in the last 3 years, and maybe re-release Skullgirls as Skullgirls Final Encore, like a complete package with the all up-to-date content.
Yeah, so there's a few questions in there. I think in terms of like a brand new bundle or a physical release or something along those lines, every option's on the table. So it's definitely something that we're interested in going through and doing. We don't have any immediate plans for that, but certainly wouldn't say no to exploring those sorts of things. In terms of what we do next, as we wrap up the season pass, obviously our focus first and foremost is on actually delivering on all those things, most notably Marie, to make sure a lot of the stuff is covered. We have every intention of continuing to go through and add more content and features to Skullgirls Second Encore in the future. The exact timing for that and what those relative priorities are, like I mentioned, is still a little bit up in the air. We may choose, for example, to go through and focus on investing more of our development energy in some of these more kind of quality of life, broader features like we were talking about with matchmaking and crossplay and things like that, which may have an impact, obviously, on our new character release cadence as well. Those are all things that we're going to be talking about and discussing so we can figure out kind of the ideal path forward. But our goal is always to kind of make sure that the Skullgirls Second Encore community and fan base is getting the things that they're going to value most. So that's definitely part of our plan moving forward.
So now I'm gonna ask you, or to the team in general, some stuff about mobile.
Sure.
So one question that I got asked a lot, with the recent addition to the game with the backstage pass,
Yeah.
many players have been asking if there's a possibility to get the backstage pass with Theonite instead of playing real money, uh, as another like way to get it, because from South America and Central America, not a lot of people that I know of have access like to credit cards or ask their parents for that.
Sure.
So in a way that at least like price it around maybe like 5k Theonite maybe, or I don't know, 10k or something like that. But have there any with the data that all you recollected from the backstage pass, are there any changes that maybe we can see in the future?
Sure. No, it's a great question. I mean, it's still so early. We've only just launched the Backstage Pass that we're still gathering a lot of information on that. But we never rule anything out. We don't have any immediate plans to go through and change the price of the Backstage Pass at this time. But the intention for the Backstage Pass was always something that a broad array of players would be able to feel comfortable if they were interested in going through and getting that premium track, that they'd be able to go through and make that investment. So if we're finding that once we go through and look at how it's performing and everything else as well, it's definitely something we'll go back and reevaluate. But it's always good to get that feedback from various folks, that are of different player types, different areas of the world, et cetera, et cetera. That's always super valuable to hear. So all stuff that we're in the process of analyzing as we speak.
With the addition of the backstage pass, also, there was the promise, maybe saying like that, of two characters releasing every month. Recently, the model that you guys had delivering new variants for the game was make a bundle of characters and release them in one big update.
Right.
Now, spreading those characters like two a month, is the team prepared to deliver on that, or there may be a problem like maybe a character that is introduced 1 month is like bugged or has some technical issue and maybe it could get delayed, maybe like that? Is there already like a huge amount of content ready to cover the whole year?
No, it's a great question. I mean, one of the things that we've been working on for a while is trying to find a way to rethink exactly how reliable our live ops content drops ultimately are. If you recall, going back years, some of these prize fights, like the special event prize fights, would only happen, every 2 or 3 months, and even then they would only be live for 4 days sometimes, and then it would just be right back to the standard character prize fight grind and whatnot. And then slowly but surely we extended that window, and then they became a full month. And now we wanted to go through and really establish the sense of every single month, when the first of the month hits, there's a bunch of new content in Skullgirls Mobile to go through and check out, whether you've been playing the game actively or not, in order to help kind of bring players back into the game as much as possible, and to keep people who are playing as engaged as possible. So that was obviously a big, all the concerns about making sure that we could go through and not only deliver new fighters, but also make sure that we're constantly looking at the existing roster and tuning fighters that might need a little bit of attention, whether they're recently released or they're older fighters. That is a non-trivial undertaking. But like I mentioned in the roadmap, there were some challenges we had when we first took over Second Encore because, even though we had new responsibilities, our team size was still more or less the same. So we had to redistribute some folks in order to make room for it. And that slowed down a lot of the development that we had on Skullgirls Mobile while we were going through and kind of getting all that infrastructure set up to properly support development of the console version. So now we're in a spot. There's always room for growth, and we're still growing, but we're in a much better spot to be able to responsibly be able to provide that content regularly. So we actually, when we were first putting our plans together, the goal was actually to release 3 new characters every month: a gold, diamond, and a silver as well. And maybe one day we'll ultimately get to that. But we thought, just to be safe, let's just start with a gold and diamond for now, and then we'll kind of see how things ultimately go. And then eventually we'd like to be able to build up to that. But again, it's a very long way of saying we're very confident in our ability to go through and be delivering 2 brand new fighters every single month in Skullgirls Mobile moving forward, in addition to much larger, content drops with a ton of variants every time a brand new character like Marie is released.
Great. In terms of as the key as Skullgirls Mobile keeps growing and growing, more fighters keep getting added to the game.
Yeah.
But then there are some fighters that end up, as time goes on, don't feel like stronger or up to par to other fighters. So how does the team judge or select which characters need to get above maybe an improvement or some changes to the kit?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we try to periodically do that, ideally a couple of times a year, go back and as part of a given update, refresh some of the existing fighters. The short answer, the place we start is usually based on community feedback. And so we read the tier lists, we watch the videos that people go through and share the videos that people make regarding fighters that are particularly strong or fighters that are particularly weak or disappointing. Some of those fighters were amazing 2 years ago, but they're not as amazing now, either because another fighter's come out that does their job better than them, or there's something that's changed in terms of, frost armor nodes and rifts, or, maybe there'll be things that come up as it relates to parallel realms that we recently launched that ultimately change the way different characters factor into the meta overall. And so we always want to be sensitive to that stuff and just make sure that, generally speaking, every character has a role and utility. It's fine for some characters to be better than others. That's inevitably the case. We don't want every character to ultimately have the same degree of utility across all modes. Different characters require more skill. Different characters they're better suited for certain modes, and they require different team comps in order to go through and be successful. But we always want to be revisiting some of those things and at least take the ones that seem to be the most poorly received or feel the most disappointing to players and make sure that they're getting the attention to kind of refresh their kit so they feel a bit more relevant. Oftentimes there are instances where, I'm trying to think of a good example. I know we recently updated Night Terror. We didn't have Immobilize, for example, when Night Terror was released. And now we have Immobilize, and Immobilize is perfect for her kit. And we knew Night Terror needed a buff. We had this new existing modifier that we knew we could use. And so we're like, great, as part of rethinking her, let's go through and introduce this element to her and then start to build some of the adjustments to her kit around that. So, we kind of read the tea leaves a little bit. And some of it is obviously also based on certain characters. When we designed them, we had a very specific intention on how we expected them to be used. And then in practice, for whatever reason, maybe people aren't using them that way. Oftentimes, that tends to be because that character is really useful and really helpful in this specific scenario, but their damage output just isn't enough for them to be actually useful. And so we start to think about ways in which maybe we could go through and nudge those things a little bit just to make sure that we have the right kind of distribution of usage of certain characters that we expect to be compelling. But we try not to be, we try to give them time in the wild. So usually if we're going to go through and make an adjustment to a character, it's because it's kind of been in this state consistently for 9 months, a year, whatever it is, and kind of give them that attention as opposed to rapidly tweaking, characters that just went through and launched. We like to let them sit for a bit and then figure out which ones need the most attention and take it from there.
So you're telling me there's hope for all the Cerebellas to get a buff?
There is. So I guess this is another thing as well, is when you look at an entire character type and all of their variants, as you may recall, we went through and recently made some changes to recently. We did a pass, for example, on when we went through and made some updates to Philia in order to go through and change some of her abilities, in order to go through and be able to use her hairball, while you're in midair and things like that. All techniques we didn't have when Philia, who was obviously in the original launch of the game, we didn't have that technology at the time. And so a lot of those older characters, Cerebella included, all kind of have a long list of notes of things we would love to go through and do in order to make changes to them, less based on the signature abilities of each of the individual characters and more looking at their moves, looking at their modifiers, certain moves that no one includes in their loadouts. We want to make sure that every single move is viable and interesting and a move you would otherwise consider, maybe not for every variant, but we want to make sure that they all feel relevant. So all of those moves that are just kind of sitting gathering dust, or you would instantly sell every time you go through and get them from a daily event, we want to make sure that you can find a home for. So again, it's a little bit tricky to go through, and our primary focus has been obviously establishing this new monthly live ops and making sure that that's all humming along and working properly. But we're really excited to go back and revisit, especially some of those original characters, and give them a fresh coat of paint, just to make them really sing in the state of Skullgirls Mobile. Now it's 6 years later.
From adjusting characters now to extra content. In Skullgirls Second Anchor, we have the additional voice packs for different characters. So far in Skullgirls Mobile, we only have the Japanese voices for the characters as a toggle, and a lot of people from that have seen Second Anchor, they love the alternate voice pack, especially the Black Dahlia Grandma voice. So some were wondering if maybe as a premium purchase in mobile, the team could add those alternate voice packs to the game.
I mean, this has been on our list literally since the beginning. We love all those alternate voice packs too, and we would love to find a way to go through and fit them into mobile. The biggest question is really just relative priority compared to other features. So I think it's just a matter of when, not if, and then just kind of figuring out the right way to make it available to players. So definitely something that we're thinking about. Frankly, every time people go through and bring it up, I always mention it whenever I write the update notes or we do the roadmap or whatever it may be. We welcome people's feedback. We want to hear what people think about the things that we are adding, but also the things we haven't added yet and what people are most excited about. We send out surveys, and all that data we're always crunching so that we can try and figure out, of the hundreds of things we'd love to do, what's the next dozen that we need to do for this next update, and then the next dozen, the next dozen. So if folks are really excited about getting new voice packs, please don't be shy about letting us know, and we'll do everything in our power to make that.
Same with voice packs, or maybe they already got into the game, but many people were surprised seeing now that in the upcoming variants we're seeing more like special or unique color variants. Similar example like Annie with her Steven Universe rose pink diamond skin. Also same with Black Dahlia in her Toho colors in Second Anchor, and also Sonic Philia. Right now, those are great. But what was the decision? Because I know that should cost extra to develop. But what was the inspiration in adding those, let's say, premium colors into the game?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think when we knew that we were going to be launching new characters every single month, we really wanted to make sure that these new diamonds that we were introducing felt really special. And some of that is going to be obviously in terms of their kit and the signature abilities and just how effective they are, just purely functionally, how easy is it to go through and win fights with these characters. But we felt like if there were opportunities when we were thinking about just the design of the character and, if there are ways in which we could ultimately make them feel that much more special, then players who do go through and get those characters are going to feel that much more proud to be able to go through and show them off and feel like they have something that feels really rare and unique. So that was something that we didn't go into that process necessarily planning to do it, but it just so happened that the individual palettes that we chose to build lent themselves really well to it, and so we decided to lean into it. There's no I can't make any promises regarding exactly what to expect moving forward, but just know that that's always something that we're looking out for. I think it's always tricky to strike a balance between just going through and implementing kind of the bare minimum that's needed in order to go through and make a character work. And then if you also see opportunities along the way to do something that's really fun and silly and clever, I think this manifests even in Second Encore with things like Umbrella's Bubbles or Dahlia's Cakes, during a win pose. Those are all things that we didn't necessarily design, right from the get-go, but as soon as someone went through and brought it up and we realized that there was a unique opportunity for the characters to kind of express themselves and have these little Easter eggs along the way, we kind of can't help ourselves, and we just see that opportunity and we want to lean into it. So we always try to keep an eye out and try not to shut anything down from the get-go. And there's so many ideas that are super cool that end up on the cutting room floor just because we don't have the time. That's usually because we've tried to carve out time for the stuff that we think is really going to be maximally impactful. So we're always on the lookout to go through and find a way to make that happen. And certainly for the diamonds, but frankly, for any new palette that we go through and introduce, if we think we've got a really cool opportunity to make that feel special and unique, we'll go ahead and lean into it. So.
Fantastic. Okay. Final question for mobile. There's this block of text in the profiles that has been saying coming soon for a long time. Sure. I understand it's not in the plans for the roadmap for this year, and I don't know if it's going to appear for the next year.
Sure.
But have you guys seen maybe the system in Injustice 2, the clan system in that game?
Yeah, yeah.
Can you guys steal that concept and take it into the game?
So yeah, I mean, it seems like you're talking about guilds, maybe, if I had to guess. Yeah, I mean, they have legitimately been coming soon for a long time. It's not a thing where we just set it and then just kind of never talk about it internally. I think perhaps some folks would be surprised to see just how many documents and decks that we've gone through and built and mock-ups and things like that about exactly what we think would be necessary in order to build a really compelling guild system. And one of the challenges with guilds, of course, is that they are extremely complex. Guilds are really a means by which we want to help serve a larger goal of ensuring that there's a stronger social component to Skullgirls Mobile beyond just the in-game chat. We want to make sure that there's ways in which you feel like you can collaborate with your friends and your guildmates, and then be able to engage in challenging content, PvE content, potentially even PvP content. So in order to go through and execute that properly, it just requires a lot of work, and there's a lot of other systems. And so what we'll do is often we'll find ourselves looking at everything that would be needed to go through and take a real meaningful step towards guilds, and then realizing that in exchange of that, we could also do these other 5 things that we know are going to be a really big quality of life improvement. The refinements we made to daily events, the refinements we made to prize fight. We have a lot of things that, even though they were already in the game, they were kind of 5 years old, and they reflected a certain style and approach that isn't quite congruous with the nature of the game today or a lot of our competitors. So it's always a really tricky balance, and it never brings me joy to go through and apologize every time I provide the update notes to say that guilds are a little bit further away. But one of the things we've been trying to do is, and you can see it a little bit in some of the recent changes we made with chat, we're trying to go through and find ways in which we can kind of carve off pieces from the things that we know we would need to do with guilds, implement them piece by piece along the way. So when time comes for us to go through and implement the core systems that are needed for guilds, it's going to be that much more easy and more viable for us to do so. So I can't speak specifically to which features from other games like Injustice 2 we would otherwise go through and have, but just know that it's something that we're talking about all the time. And we're eager to go through and make happen. And I think a lot of the stuff we've been doing, even though it may not seem that way, are in fact kind of stepping stones towards making it that much more viable for us to go through and implement guilds in the near future.
Excellent. Okay, one final question to close this interview. You guys took the paper.
Oh, there we go.
So long ago, when Skullgirls Mobile was on Kickstarter, there was a character pool vote showcasing various characters that the community could select or vote for them to see if they could enter the game. Squiggly came from there, Beowulf also, Big Band 2. So here's the picture with all the characters. Right now, we understand that Mary is already in the game.
Yep.
So I wanted to ask the team, which character do you want the most to get in the game?
So obviously, this is a challenging question to answer because whatever answer I give, people are going to presume is kind of already slated to be included. So I'm going to preface all this by saying that the process for us determining exactly which characters you go through and pick involves a lot of people and a lot of voices. It's also not just whatever one character we want. We need to consider the full set of whichever characters we would go through and introduce next to make sure that there's enough variety amongst those characters, that there's enough gameplay opportunities that we're excited to go through and explore, and things along those lines. So just a bunch of caveats up front about what that process ultimately looks like. I know we've also gone out of our way to try and find different ways in which we can give. There's so many awesome characters in the Skullgirls universe. We want to try and find ways in which those characters can be present in both the stories that we're telling, as well as even just hosting various things like the COC, or you often see Stanley in game, all these different things where they ultimately pop up. So, we're always trying to find a way to, whether they make it as full characters or not, we want to make sure that the full cast of Skullgirls is more as present as humanly possible. All that said, I'm personally super excited to go through and see Brain Drain in the game at some particular point. So I would be super excited for that. Whether, whenever that ultimately happens, I'm an incredibly patient person. So, whether it's this go around or some other point in the future, I'll just be excited whenever he finally makes his way in. So
great.
Cool.
Jesse, you wanna?
Oh, sure.
Bounce also.
Yeah. Should I just shimmy?
No,
Oh no, we're all just gonna get around. Okay, cool.
Come on, Juju.
Yeah.
I've said it on stream multiple times. I'd love to see Panzerfaust in the game.
Let's go.
I just really like big, chunky characters like that.
For you, Juju?
The toss up between Brain Drain and Minette. Probably Minette. Yeah, she's cute.
A lot of people are rooting for Minette to get into the game.
Oh yeah, I know.
If Cellside were here, he would answer it.
Yeah,
you know, just-
Cellside will.
yeah.
Okay, Jesse,
It's better for me to sit in the background.
Right behind Jesse.
influence him. Whisper to his ear.
Follow up a bit on what Charlie was saying about the palette stuff for mobile, like the Philias and the Annies and all that stuff. That's also a result of opportunities we've been building up kind of slowly, because when we took stewardship of Skullgirls' second encore, it was, you had to have Visual Studio 2008 and Maya 2000. Like, it was a 10-year-old game, and its technology showed it. And so we've been, as Charlie mentioned in some other answers, we've been bringing the game up to more modern programming standards, making it much easier to do Switch, which we basically reported it to Switch for the release last December. Like, we couldn't even we got the what's the name of the company? We got the Skybound code base, but it's like we had done so many changes to the code base since Annie and Umbrella that it wasn't compatible anymore. So we just used that as kind of a bouncing off point to redo all the work for Switch. And then that is also, like, all these tech changes is what made Xbox One possible, as Charlie hinted at. But the palettes that for Philia and Annie, and as you've been pointing out, is kind of a result of also a paradigm shift of, we're not doing something one-off that's just going to shove it in the C++ code, like Rainbow Blight. Doing all of her rainbow colors in SG2 and SGM is a very one-off code base. No one else can really use it super easily without looking just Rainbow Blight, because it's just her whole palette. But for Annie, for Umbrella, for the things that, like, making Annie's sword change colors during her rainbow thing, making it so Umbrella could have the veins on Hunger, and these are all technological things that we were making for characters, but we were making them so they weren't one-off to those characters. They were making them so they were tools for other characters to use. And so, for example, Dahlia stood on Annie and Umbrella's shoulders. That was probably awkward, but anyway. Where the gun in her ammo is the same tech that drives Annie's sword colors changes, and the fishnets on the bunnies are the same unmoving plaid technology that Umbrella originally had for her veins. And Marie's continuing to build on some of that too, with some of the stuff that you'll be able to see once she gets out into early access for second encore and into mobile. But the Philia palette and the Annie palette in particular were the results of that. It was like, okay, we have all these tools, and so we can take these opportunities for, like, these transforming palettes. The Annie one didn't require any new tech out of the box when we were implementing it. It just worked, and just all we had to do was tie it to her star power activation. For the Philia one, we had to do a little bit of new tech because, if folks may not notice, when she goes into that golden mode, her line color is changing as well to kind of try to really accent her color. And that's new tech that was developed just for that palette. But that was also based on the fact that, like, oh, we were doing alter ego for mobile, and that was line color tech that Skullgirls Mobile already had. And so it's also just the two games are kind of feeding off one another. Was like, oh, Skullgirls Mobile had this line color tech. Okay, we can get that working in SG2E, and then we advanced it in SG2E to make it work in even better. So it's kind of, the two projects are feeding off each other in a very positive loop in that regard.
Taking on point of that, while developing new tech, we first saw, like, the addition of new sprites or objects floating around characters, specifically with the Skullgirl umbrella. Now that she has the skull following her, and also with the new premium color for Black Dahlia, that she has this little, like, glowing thing floating around her. Like, those all were part of new developments from the game.
So those are an interesting thing, because that is a mix of Hidden Variable trying to keep up the tradition of, like, going the extra mile that, like, Lab Zero and now Future Club people have always done. Like, they've always tried to go the extra mile, and that's kind of why Skullgirls is so beloved. It's like, oh, you've got the 1 in 1,000 or whatever chance to get the Doodle Cat on Cerebella, or if you do use the Battletoad palette and you do a headbutt, you get 2,000 points or something in that regard. And so some of that was doing just us taking the extra effort to do that for those palettes and having that kind of opportunity and fun with that. But I will say, oh my God, that orbiting little doodad on Dahlia that was a lot of math.
That little thing, like, following her around the stage whenever she moves.
It's a lot of lerps and a lot of maths and a lot of art codes tangents and all such a thing. So, but we got it working. And so, yeah, that, like, it is a sign of how much we care for the game that we think of an opportunity. It's like it's going to take a little bit more extra effort, but it's like okay, but it's worth it. And again, this is all stuff now that we now know how to do. This engine is now able to support and do, which means it's got an opportunity we use for other characters in interesting ways. Like there's never been a tool I've developed that wasn't used for another character going on down the line since we took over for Annie.
I've been asked sometimes people love the Annie palette, and we have Parasol and Peacock have Annie palettes in the game.
Yeah.
So could there be a possibility of like the whole cast getting an Annie color palette?
We totally have the tools for it, but it's a the one hurdle that we're feeling that we're coming up against, particularly with Skullgirls Second Encore, is the fact that palette selection is a bit of a bear in Skullgirls Second Encore. Like currently everyone has like 32 palettes, and it's like unless you know the 6-button combination or so, it's like it takes a lot to see them all. And so we're always eager to do more palettes and all that stuff, and we're trying to figure out the best way to bring those things. Like, of course, we've got all these new palettes that are now Skullgirls mobile thing. We do want to get those over to Second Encore eventually. But there's a lot of biz devy stuff going on for that. As I look over at the boss, that it affects when and how those will get there. But we do want to get them out there, and we do want to continue kind of making those sorts of features. And but kind of the similar way, like the character select screen is kind of starting to run out of space. If we were to do a second season, we'd have to like figure out where the heck are we going to put 4 other fighters on that grid without it like intruding onto other bits of UI. The same kind of thing with the palette, where it's like as we add more palettes, we have to start coming up more and more to the fact that like the palette selector wasn't really made for 3 dozen palettes or something.
Yeah. Well, now that you say that, when I saw the pre-alpha for Marie, she's she's in the top center of the screen. There are 2 spaces.
Well, that's because that's because we're going to have 18 characters for the season 1 pass after the season 1 pass is done, and it's a 3x3 grid, and there's a random cube in there. That's just math.
But there may be a chance of maybe 2 more.
Whatever you need to tell yourself at night. It's like as Charlie was alluded to either in an answer that's to come or has come. It's like there's a lot of irons in the fire when it comes to what comes next after the season 1 pass. Is it more characters in the season 2 pass, or is it some other entire different mechanism for it? And but we're still exploring a lot of that, and we don't really have solid answers.
All right. Thank you very much for all the info about that. Oh, okay. Talking about the Black Dahlia thing, then the glowing thing around her is not a sprite; it's a 3D object.
No, it's a sprite. It is a 2D sprite, and we are forcing that engine to do line rendering in ways it was never meant to be done, but we got it working. So, but yeah, no, it is. There is no 3D object going on with that circling trail and all that stuff. Like just because, honestly, trying to implement that level of 3D mesh generation into this 10-year-old C++ raw game engine would have been more difficult. No, that's just a lot of careful logic done to decide, like, okay, at what parts of the loop should it be behind Dahlia? Because we have, of course, all the complex layering stuff that lets us make sure the different sprites are in the correct orders and everything. Like playing around with that, and even Marie has a little bit of new tech with that because to make sure that her flame on her back is behind her but in front of her hose, because her hose is drawn in her base frame. So there's a little bit of new tech in there to make sure all that layering looks really good. But yeah, it's just that's all 2D. There's no it's all 2D math and all that stuff. No 3D going on in there. Just
since all the rest of the team did this, I wanted to know which character would you like to see in the game, possibly in the future? Like, I understand that there's no promises.
Yeah, no, like, assuming this has been cut behind the big spiel that Charlie gave and other answers, so, like, one I would be very interested in seeing, particularly based on, like, some of the stuff she has, is Molly. Just, like, the whole interesting kind of thing of maybe a character that has or summons a mech and pilots that around a bit during her fight sequence.
Yeah, I've seen it. There's like a whole concept now, thanks to the webtoon, that has shown a small fight of Molly using her mech against Marie skeletons.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's lots of opportunities. All the characters have lots of opportunities, so it's like it's just a matter of It's in the future. Who could say? Maybe Aeon could, but
Maybe. Thank you very much, Chris.
Mhm.
Jesse.
yes, thank you, thank you.
As a way to close this, on behalf of all the Central and South American community of Skullgirls, we all thank you for your work. Thank you very much for all of you done, keeping Skullgirls alive, celebrating, adding new content, allowing a lot of people to get into fighting games thanks to the mobile game, and also uh, teaching them the roots to start playing other fighting games. Not only that, but as you guys keep developing or promoting the game, a lot of people in the art in the art communities are they also develop their own art because Skullgirls has had such a strong art direction that a lot of people could not tell or believe that this is a 2010 game. Still, the game looks fantastic till this day. So thank you to the whole team for all the work that you've done.
Thank you so much. Oh, sorry.
No.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's cool. Yeah.
No, I think we feel incredibly privileged to be kind of again the stewards of this game. We've been such huge fans of Skullgirls for a long time that it's really exciting to be able to go through and bring it to so many new people. Like you mentioned, I think that, or as I like to say, I think some people may be playing their first genre for the very first time and they don't even realize it. A lot of people never even bother trying fighting games. And so the fact that so many folks are able to go through and use Skullgirls as a means of kind of getting their feet wet and then jump into other games. I mean, our whole goal in general is just to try and increase the net joy in the world by virtue of the stuff that we do. And I think fighting games are an amazing. They can increase your net frustration too along the way. But I think all told, I think a lot of people, are kind of discovering this genre that I've loved for as long as I can remember, ever since I was, kind of the Street Fighter 2 king of my arcade. So I'm just super excited to be able to help kind of provide that for a lot of folks. So thank you so much. That's awesome to hear.
Yeah, thanks, Drexo.
Thanks,
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.